Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome back to all of you guys. Nice to see you all back here. So we're going to start with meditation, just like we did this morning, the loving kindness meditation. The only difference is I'm not going to do the guidance on the breathing mindfulness meditation. I know some of you guys just meditated with me for the first time this morning, but typically what I do in this course is as we go, I start pulling back the guidance and the meditation more and more so that way students can more and more stand up on their own 2 feet and actually be meditating on their own. So for those of you guys that have been meditating with me for a while, you know the breathing mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath, and then whenever the mind moves off that, you're cutting that off and bringing the mind back. For those of you guys that just started meditating with me, just do that for the first 3 to 4 minutes, because I'm going to just do chanting to ease us into the meditation. And then the first 3 or 4 minutes there where it's quiet, just focus on your breath. And anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. But then you're going to hear me come in about 4 or 5 minutes with the affirmations for loving kindness meditation, because that's what we're really focused on in this class, is developing the mind to be loving and kind and have these harmonious relationships. And as long as there's anger and hostility in the mind, you can't have harmonious relationships with others. So in this particular course, I really focus on the loving kindness meditation, where we have other courses that focus on other types of meditation that you need. So this one we're doing loving kindness, but for that first few minutes, you can be doing the breathing mindfulness. Then I'll come in with the affirmations for the loving kindness. Then we're going to go back to breathing mindfulness. Then we'll come out with the chanting. And then that's where I'm going to start this topic of practicing non-attachment, how to eliminate attachment to those who are closest to you, because those are some of the hardest attachments to eliminate. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. So if you'd like to join for meditation, there's the 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. You're welcome to take whatever position you like. With the loving kindness, we usually do seated, lying, or standing. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sankho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May mom and dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I interact with today be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. Now go back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, I'm going to share this next topic with you guys, practicing non-attachment, how to eliminate attachment to those that are closest to us. As I mentioned, these are some of the strongest attachments to let go of. Your parents, your children, your life partners, brothers, sisters, grandparents, people like this. Your mind's holding on the tightest with these individuals. And that's why you probably experience the most difficulties in these kinds of relationships, right? These are the ones that are the more challenging ones. This is why sometimes we think that the problem is other people, because you go out with your friends and you guys just have a great old time. You're having all kinds of good time. There's no arguments. There's no frustration. You're just having a good time. But when it comes to your life partner or your parents or your siblings or people like this, man, it's just so hard for you to maybe get along with some of those people. Well, everything that's happening that's causing this is within your own mind. Of course, these people might be doing something unwise, right? They might be talking bitter or harsh or hostile. They might be disrespectful or impolite. Yeah, that's what they might be doing. And those are unwise things. But what's causing your frustration and your agitation is your mind's craving permanence. You're wanting them to be a certain way. You're expecting them to be a certain way. And you're attaching your contentedness to them. If they're happy, you'll be happy. But if they're argumentative and angry, you're going to be argumentative or angry. Your mind's attached. You haven't let go yet. You're forming your inner feelings based on this other person. That's what it means when your mind is attached. You're craving, you're expecting, you're wanting this person to be a certain way. And when they're that way, you're happy. But when they're not that way, you're might angry or frustrated. So I'm going to teach you how to eliminate this from your mind. understand that everything that I share with you here is based on someone already knowing the Eightfold Path. So I know a lot of you guys haven't studied the Eightfold Path with me, and that's okay, because I teach it many times and it's been recorded. It's in the books and everything like this. You guys can learn it. But if you haven't learned that yet, you're going to need to go back and learn that. And then as you do, and you're practicing that better and better, then you're going to need to understand these things here to be able to do these things. It doesn't mean you can't do these things without having practiced the Eightfold Path. It just means that if you have the Eightfold Path underway, your mind's going to be able to let go of your attachment much better, because there's certain things on the Eightfold Path that's going to teach your mind to let go. And if you're not doing those things, these things are going to be a bit more challenging for you. So I'm going to dive in here and teach you guys the things that you need to know, but just understand that it's based on the understanding that a student already knows and is already practicing the Eightfold Path. Okay, so just like always, you're always welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. Either here at the temple, you guys can use the mics, or online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom if you have any questions. So the first thing is, as your family members or your close loved ones, the people that are close to you, are struggling, you're going to need to learn how to allow the struggle. This can be really challenging for us, particularly when it's like our kids or something like this. If you have children, it's really hard to sit back and let other people struggle, because you might feel like you want to rush in there and fix things or do things or tell them how to do something. You need to be able to learn how to let go. So in some situations, people are going to need to struggle. That doesn't mean that you don't offer them suggestions, because you can offer them suggestions. You can offer them some support, but sometimes they're just not interested. They're just not interested in what it is you have to say, and they're going to do it their way regardless. Like the description I gave you earlier, some of you guys were here when I was talking about my mom, how my mom even came to me before asking for advice, and I spent an entire hour talking to her, and at the end of the conversation she says, "Thank you so much, but I'm not going to do it that way." Right? Sometimes people even ask for your advice and they still aren't going to do what it is that you're suggesting. And that's okay. That's their decision. So you're going to need to understand that it's their life, it's their decisions, it's their results. We refer to this as karma, or you might have heard this referred to as karma. The word karma is from the Sanskrit language. The word karma is from the Pali language. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. The word karma, it means cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. When you make decisions wisely, you're going to experience wholesome karma, or wholesome results. When you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome karma, or unwholesome results. So based on the wisdom that you have, or lack thereof, of the natural laws of existence, you're going to be making either wise or unwise decisions in life. And so is everybody else. And they're going to be experiencing either wholesome or unwholesome results. So if someone lacks wisdom and they're headed for trouble, you can try to help them. You could try to offer your support, but oftentimes they're just not interested. And if you're attached to them, you're going to really have painful feelings when you see them struggling. That's because of your attachment. You want them to permanently be okay. But you need to understand that them being okay is a function of their decisions. It's not a function of your decisions. If you could make other people well, then everyone in the world would be just fine, because you would go make everybody well. But you can't. It's not possible. So people are going to need to struggle. The wisdom that you have that has led to whatever it is that you know about the world right now, you've accomplished that and acquired that through certain struggles that you've had. Certain struggles that you went through, you cultivated wisdom, and it helped you to be able to learn in life and be able to do things differently. Now, it's always best if somebody can give you advice and you just implement that wisdom right away and there's no struggle. But in some cases, we have to struggle, and that's how we learn, and that's how we grow, and that's how we cultivate wisdom, and that's how we don't struggle next time, is that we go through the struggle once, we cultivate the wisdom, and then we figure it out, right? So in some situations, people are going to need to struggle, and they're going to be gaining the wisdom. So the way that you eliminate your difficulties in these situations is you're going to have to allow the struggle. I'll give you an example of this. My son, one time, he was hanging out with some kids in the village, and he was probably a good, maybe 8 years old at that time. And me and my wife were advising him, and we said, hey, the kids that you're hanging out with, they're usually into trouble, and you're going to get into some trouble if you hang out with them. You're going to have problems. And he's like, nah, they're my buddies. I'm going to hang out with them. Da, 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 da. Oh, it's so much fun. We have a great time. Okay, do whatever you would like to do. You do what you like to do. We're just letting you know that if you hang out with them, you're going to have some problems. He's like, nah, these are my buddies. I'm going to hang out. Okay, no problem. So he hung out with them, right? And about 2 or 3 months later, he came home one day and he didn't have his bicycle helmet with him. And we were like, what happened to your bicycle helmet? I thought you were wearing your bicycle helmet. He's like, somebody stole it. And we're like, really? Who stole it? He's like, I don't know. I was at my friend's house. We were all together. This particular friend left early and my motorbike and my bicycle helmet wasn't out there. And I was like, oh, I bet he probably took it. I thought that was your best buddy. He's like, yeah, me too. Right. So then we went and figured out what was going on. And of course, his friend took his bicycle helmet. Well, then he still hung out with these people, right? So then about a month later, he came home and he was all drenched. He was soaking wet. And we were like, what happened? And he was like, I was riding my bike and they got a bunch of buckets of water and they dumped them over my head and they hit me on the head with the bucket. And we're like, okay, those are the people that we mentioned to you about. It wouldn't be wise to hang out with them, right? He's like, yeah. And I was like, well, what are you going to do now? He's like, I'm probably not going to spend much time with them anymore. And I was like, okay, it's up to you. Right. So we had to let him struggle. We had to let him go through that because now he's about 12 years old and he's been to 2 different schools, 3 total, but he's been to 2 different schools. And what I noticed is when he went into these new schools, he was really able to make wise decisions about who to hang out with. Because each school, there's certain kids that are into wholesome things, there's certain kids that are into unwholesome things, but the kids that he tends to hang around with are all the ones that are doing wholesome things. Not because mom and dad told him to, not because we're forcing him to, but because he cultivated that wisdom on his own. He figured out how to make wise choices about who to hang out with. So now when he goes to different schools, he tends to hang out with a lot of the wholesome people that are into wholesome things. And that's wisdom that he needed. And no matter how much we tried to force him or if we put our expectations on him or tried to control him not to hang out with those kids in the village, he would have never cultivated that wisdom. He needed to cultivate that wisdom of how to choose friends wisely or unwisely. And now he's got that wisdom. So now whether we're with him or we're not with him, he can make those decisions. Whereas if we tried to force him and control him and we put our expectations on him, he would have never cultivated the wisdom because it was mom and dad that were making the decisions. It wasn't him. But because he went through those experiences, he cultivated the wisdom and now he's got that. Whether mom and dad are there or not, he can make those decisions on his own. So sometimes you need to allow the struggle. Whether it's your parents or your brothers and sisters or your life partner, you can offer your advice like we did with my son, but sometimes they're just not interested. They would like to do it their way. Okay, just let them do it their way. And they're going to cultivate some wisdom and they're going to come out the other side better off. But you're just going to need to eliminate your craving so that when you see them going through this struggle, you're not upset. So when my son came home missing his motorbike helmet, in the back of my mind, I was laughing, right? I didn't laugh in front of him, but in the back of my mind, I was laughing. When he came home and he was drenched and he was soaking wet, I thought it was comical. I didn't laugh in front of him, but I thought it was funny. We still handled it. We went and talked to the boy. We sat down with the family and kind of talked to them and sorted it all out. But nonetheless, I wasn't upset because I knew that he was headed for these problems, but he didn't see it himself. But now he understands. He's got that wisdom, right? So you're going to need to not have your feelings attached to your family members. So when my son was going through this, maybe another parent would have been upset or angry that somebody dumped water on their child. But for me, I knew that this was part of the learning lessons. He needed to experience that struggle to cultivate the wisdom. Understand that each individual being is their own being. Sometimes when we get married, we think that we're just one person. Sometimes some cultures think this is like once we're married, we're now one person and we need to agree on everything, right? Or if you're living in a life partnership relationship, someone might think we're one person and we have to agree on everything. This isn't actually true. Even when you're together with a life partner for many, many years, you're still not going to agree on everything. That's normal. So remember that everybody is an individual being, whether it's your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters. They're all individual beings and they all need to make different decisions. They need to feel comfortable making their own decisions. Where again, if you're attached to your family members and you see them heading for trouble, you might feel like you need to rush in there, make a bunch of decisions for them and make it all better. And that's just because you're not wanting to have those painful feelings. Whereas if you let go and you let go of your attachment, no matter what decision decisions they make, you can still maintain your contentedness and your joy. So whether it's a life partner or a married couple or any other relationships, it's important that you understand you guys are going to disagree sometimes. And disagreement doesn't mean that you hate each other. It doesn't mean that there needs to be division. And it doesn't mean that you're being disrespectful. It just means that you have different opinions and you need to learn to let go and allow other people to have their own decisions, and that your decisions don't have to be their decisions, and their decisions don't have to be your decisions. You guys can make different decisions. I'll give you another example. My wife tends to do things all by herself, right? She likes to do things all by herself, and she won't even consult with me on a lot of things, right? So we live in this house together, and I ended up purchasing this house with money from when I was in IT. I ended up purchasing this house, and we live together, but it's in her name, right? It's her house. The way that me and my son think about it, it's her house. Him and I just live there. That's it, right? So there's times where I wake up in the morning and I hear saws and drills in my house, and I'm like, what's going on? And I wake up in the morning, I'll go outside and they're remodeling one room. And I'll go to my wife and I'm like, what's happening? She's like, oh yeah, I'm remodeling that room. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going back to sleep. Good night, or good, whatever. If it was me, I would have consulted with her. I would have said, hey, honey, I'm thinking about remodeling this room. I'd like to do it this way or do it that way. How are you about that? Are you okay with that? Right? That's the way I would do it. But she doesn't think that way. The way she's grown up is that she just goes off and does it her way. Now, for some partners, you might feel like, oh, I couldn't live with someone like that. No way. But for me, I'm just completely fine with it. I've just learned that's the way she is, and she just does things on her own, right? She's going to make her own decisions. So you might end up being around somebody that's like this, and just understand that's their own decisions, and you need to make your decisions. If you can live with this and you're comfortable with that, fine, live with that, right? If not, then maybe you need to have a discussion. You need to figure this out, right? Sometimes I've come home from the temple and she's got a truck at the house and they're loading up furniture and she's giving away furniture. She hasn't even talked to me about it, right? She's not even said like, hey, would you like to have this piece of furniture? Nope. It's just someone's taken it and it's gone. It's like it's out of the house, right? It's just her decisions. So she's her own individual being making her own decisions, and I'm not attached to any of the stuff at our house, so I'm completely fine with it. But for somebody else, you might have a different opinion, so you're going to need to sort that out whenever you're having someone close to you, whether it's a life partner or your family members or people that you're close to. But you can't base your feelings on their decisions, right? If I was attached to the house or I was clinging to my wife and always wanting her to consult with me about everything, I would be upset, because that is the way I used to be. Before I learned these teachings, nothing happened in our house unless I knew about it. It was kind of like my iron fist. That's the way I used to do things in the past. So that's probably why she's like this now, because in the past it was completely the other way, that she had to check with me about everything. Nothing could move in the house without me knowing about it. But since I've been practicing these teachings, she started to do it this way now, where she just goes off and does everything her own way. Right? So if I expected my wife to always consult with me about everything before she does anything, that's my mind craving permanence. So you're going to need to look at these kinds of things and not attach your feelings to what your partners are doing or what your loved ones are doing or the people that are close to you. And understand that they're going to have disagreements, and that's okay. It's important to have discussions versus forced agreement. Sometimes when we're involved with a person who's close, either a life partner or a family member or something like that, we try to force them to agree with us. But what you would like to be able to do is have discussions. There were times in the past where I'd want to go to the movies, for example, and I would go to my wife and I would say, hey, I'm going to go see, I don't know, let's just say Superman. I'm going to go see that new Superman movie. Would you like to come? And she'd say, no, I'm going to stay home. And I would be angry. I'd be upset. You party pooper, why don't you come? You should come with me. I was attached to her. I couldn't go to the movies by myself and have fun. I wanted to go with her. So I started putting this pressure on her to try to convince her to come to the movies with me. And I would start ridiculing her sometimes and kind of trying to force her. Sometimes she would relent and she would come with me. But then she was grumpy the whole time because she wanted to really be at home anyway. And then I was grumpy because I didn't want to be at the movies with a grumpy person, right? So it didn't really work out to any of our advantage anyway, right? So what I've learned through the teachings of the Buddha is when I go to my wife and I say, hey, would you like to go see the new Superman movie? And she says, no, I'd like to stay at home. Okay, have a good time. I'll see you when we get back, right? Just done, over with. Doesn't mean she doesn't love me. Doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy spending time with me. She would just rather stay at home in that moment, right? Maybe she's working a lot, or maybe she's got some work she needs to do and she would like to rest first, right? She's not interested in coming to the movies, and that's okay. Instead of trying to force her to do something, we just had discussions, because before, we used to fight until death and to figure out who was right and who was wrong about any one particular topic, where now we just have discussions, right? So you're going to need to ask people questions and then just accept whatever decision they say. Don't try to force them into your decision making. Just if they say yes or they say no, just accept whatever they're going to say and move on. Get comfortable with spending time alone. This is going to help you to eliminate your attachment to others, where when I grew up in the USA, and when we would go to the mall, for example, as a child, if I went there as a teenager by myself, people would consider you to be a loser because you don't have friends, right? Or if when I went to college, if you went to the dining hall and you were eating dinner alone at college, they consider you to be a loser because you don't have friends, right? So there was like this social pressure to always be around people. And if you're around people, it means you're likable, you're popular, and you have friends. But if you were alone, people didn't look at you so favorably, right? So your mind can get conditioned in these kind of cultures to think that you always have to be around people, and that you get attached to always being around people. But what you would like to do is get comfortable going off and being alone, whether it's going to the movies alone, whether it's going to the mall alone, whether it's going to a nice restaurant alone, right? Take yourself on a date. Fall in love with yourself. Even though you can't fall in love, it's really falling into craving. But you need to learn how to love yourself, right? Maybe you'll go out to a really nice restaurant with a friend or family member and you'll spend money on everybody else to take them out to dinner. But have you ever done that for yourself? Have you ever been to a really nice, fancy restaurant and spend a good amount of money on yourself for dinner? Go do that sometime. You'll see that it's very fun. And because if you don't enjoy spending time alone with yourself, who would ever enjoy spending time with you, right? If you don't enjoy spending time alone with yourself, who's ever going to enjoy spending time with you? So you need to learn how to spend time alone. You can go shopping alone. You can go to dinners and holidays and vacations. When you get comfortable with being alone, and you're very comfortable being alone, then when you're with other people, it's just like, oh, this is a bonus. I can be with other people. But you need to be careful, because sometimes you can get attached to being alone too. And now you don't feel comfortable being with other people. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be comfortable alone, but you'll also be comfortable with other people as well. So the way you do that is start putting your mind in this situation. If you go to the mall here in Thailand, I would say a good 50% of the people sometimes are there alone. They're all by themselves, just walking around, being alone, right? Or if you go to the park, it's not uncommon to see people alone, just walking around in the park, right? So if you do these kinds of things, it'll be really beneficial for you. And some of you guys travel alone, which I know that's really helpful for you. You're already doing this in some cases. But if you travel with somebody and you're going on holiday with somebody, it's helpful that even when you travel, you sometimes go do things alone. This is really helpful for your mind to not be attached. Because sometimes when we travel, we might think that we have to be with that person all the way for the whole week or the whole 2 weeks or the whole month or something like that. But when you go travel with people, it's good to be together, and it's good to be away from each other and go do things independently sometimes. This trains your mind to not be attached in these situations. So even when you travel together with people, still find some time alone when you're spending time alone. And then when you come back together, you'll have so many more things to talk about. It'll be so enjoyable. Okay, so that's something that you can do, is spend time alone. When you're communicating with people that are close to you, that your mind potentially is attached to, and even other people too, communicate with a purpose. Sometimes when we're attached to people, say like a boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe one of us go on a business trip and you call back and you're like, oh, honey, I miss you so much. I wish I was with you. Oh, I feel so miserable being away from you. Do you miss me too? I miss you. Do you miss me? this isn't communicating with a purpose, right? If you're doing these kinds of things where you're saying, where are you? What are you doing? I miss you. I want you to do this, or I want you to do that. This is just the mind craving. When you're talking with each other, be sure you communicate with a purpose. There should be some real purpose behind it, other than just, I miss you, I love you, I wish I was there, why can't you be here, I want to be there. This is just the mind having attachment. Your meditation and generosity is going to help your mind to let go. This is generalized training for all cravings, desires, attachments, not just with people close to you. You would like to practice breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. These are going to be continuous, ongoing, proactive ways to train your mind to let go. The meditation where your mind moves off the breath and you cut it off and let it go, and you're practicing generosity to give and share with others. As you're giving and sharing, it's training your mind to let go. If you're sharing without any expectation of anything in return, like your time, effort, energy, and resources, this trains your mind to let go. So you'd like to be doing this daily, both of these things. If you're practicing frequently, meditation and practicing generosity frequently, this is going to train your mind to let go. If you walk together in life and you walk together in these teachings, where possible, this is going to be better, right? Because if you're in relationships where you're practicing and they're not, you might be getting rid of your attachment, but they're not getting rid of their attachments. They're still staying attached to you. So if you're, say, like in a family where there's a family living together, if everybody's practicing the teachings, this is best because everybody can support each other. But not in every situation is that going to be the case. As we were talking in our last talk, you're going to have people who just aren't interested in practicing the teachings. But where possible, if you guys are all practicing the teachings, it actually works out a lot better for you. As I gave you that example earlier, where if like somebody goes on a business trip that's practicing the teachings and they call back and say, hey honey, what's up? How you doing? And they're like, oh, I miss you so much. Did you miss me too? No, I didn't miss you. Sorry. Right? Like, so they're not going to really understand. So it's really helpful if you're all practicing the teachings. Also, sleeping alone can be helpful. If you're in a partnership with a person, oftentimes we sleep together in the same bed, and we think that this is the sign of a healthy relationship. And sometimes when we sleep apart, we think that something's wrong with that. We think that maybe somebody's angry. And that's when we sleep apart. When our aversion kicks in, we push people away, we push each other away, and you're in the doghouse. I'm sleeping in the bed, and you're in the doghouse, right? But you don't have to be that way, right? You can choose to sleep alone, even when things are going great in your relationships. If you've ever had a long-term relationship with somebody where you guys were sleeping together, and then one of you guys went on a trip, you probably saw that it was hard to fall asleep because your mind was attached to this person and you're so used to having them sleep right next to you that when they're away, you had a hard time sleeping and a hard time falling asleep. So what you would like to do is, in situations, even when everything's completely content and peaceful, is sometimes sleep together and sometimes sleep apart. Train your mind to be okay with that impermanence. Whereas if your mind craves the permanence of always sleeping together, then when you guys do sleep separately, because you're going to occasionally, you're going to have a hard time sleeping and falling asleep. So if you get used to sleeping together and sleeping apart and doing this even when things are just completely fine in your relationship, then you don't see it as a problem when you're sleeping apart, and your mind will be much more comfortable, and you'll train the mind to let go and not be attached. Okay. Oftentimes we're taught, at least in the culture that I grew up in, that we say a family that eats together stays together. Do you guys have this in your culture? You ever heard this before? A family that eats together stays together. This isn't actually true. Right? The idea that every single member of the family is going to be hungry at exactly the same time, and we all should come together every single day and eat together every single day, this is unlikely. It's not going to happen, right? So if we're all forced to eat together at exactly the same time at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whatever time every day, this is where arguments usually happen, at the dinner table with families, because people are feeling forced to be there and they're attached to eating together. And they think if we don't eat together, our family's not going to stay together. This just isn't true. Everybody's going to eat at different times potentially, because we all get hungry at different times. So if you learn that we don't have to be sitting together every single moment and eating together, that's not the determining factor of whether we're going to stay together, that we can learn to eat together and we can learn to not eat together. It's okay. It's not the attachment that is going to create the closeness. The attachment where the mind is attached, where we have to eat together all the time, this is what's producing the discontentedness. It's through eliminating the attachment that is actually going to allow you to be closer. This is the unfortunate thing that the mind lacks wisdom of. We think the tighter we hold on to a relationship, the closer we're going to be. But actually, the tighter you hold on, the more you're going to crush it. Whereas if you hold the relationship in your open hand and just support it, you'll actually be together happily for a very long time. Whereas if you hold on to it and you cling to it and you try to force it, that's when you're going to sabotage your relationships. So you'd like to just kind of let things ebb and flow. So like, for example, in our house, we have a dining room table, but then we have a couch around the dining room table. It's like an open floor plan. So like my son can be eating at the table and I can be sitting on the sofa working on the computer, and we're spending time together and we're talking and chatting and things like this. But we don't all sit down as a family and eat. It's very rare, maybe once a month, once every 2 months that we sit down and eat. And it's not even a planned thing. It just happens by itself. We just all happen to show up at the table at the same time. But typically, if my wife's eating at the table, I might be sitting on the sofa. Or if my son's eating at the table, I might be sitting on the sofa. We're kind of generally in the same area together, but we're not doing exactly the same thing together. So you can set your houses up like this so that you can still spend time together, because it feels nice to spend time together. And then sometimes you eat together and sometimes you don't. It's okay, right? That's impermanence. You're not going to eat together all the time, and you're not going to never eat together either. This is the impermanent nature of spending time together. So you like to get the mind used to spending time together sometimes and sometimes not. That's the impermanent nature of life, and you would like to be able to acknowledge it as that. It doesn't mean you don't love each other because you're not choosing to eat together. It just means there's impermanence here. And some people eat at some times and other people eat at other times, and that's okay. If you experience discontentedness in your relationships, there's attachment. So if you get angry at your mom, you're attached to your mom. If you get frustrated with your life partner, you're attached to your life partner. If you get annoyed with your children, you're attached to your children. This is the indicator for you that you have attachment in your relationships. You're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing like that. You don't have to feel guilty or shameful. It's just what the unenlightened mind does. Because of its lack of training and its lack of wisdom, it gets attached to the people around you. So you can use that discontentedness as like a red light on the dashboard of your car. And when you see you're getting discontent in a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to push the person away. It doesn't mean you have to be bitter and harsh and hostile with them. It doesn't mean you have to put your expectations on them. What it means is you need to eliminate your attachment. And when you eliminate your attachment, that's where the peace and the joy in the relationship will come. So use the discontentedness in your relationships as an indication for you that you're attached. And you need to eliminate the attachment. You don't need to eliminate the relationship. You need to eliminate the attachment. And when you get rid of that, that's what's going to help you to get to peace and joy in the relationship. As you're spending time with people, think about quality of time versus quantity of time. Sometimes we think that if we spend this exorbitant amount of time with people, that somehow this is a sign of our love because we spend so much time with people. But you would like to spend quality time with people. You know, a really good quality 1 or 2 hours with somebody is much better than spending day upon day where you're not really involved in the relationship and spending time with the person. So look at quality of time instead of quantity. You're going to need to have patience because any of these attachments that are really strong with the people that are close to you, they're not going to be eliminated quickly. It's like an onion. Your mind is almost like an onion. The outer layers of the onion peel off really easily. But as you get closer and closer into the core of the onion, it's harder and harder to peel those layers back. So if it's a matter of, you training your mind to let go of one simple thing or another, like maybe you're attached to a piece of jewelry, okay, you could probably let that go pretty easily. But letting go of mom or dad, letting go of that attachment is a lot harder. So you're going to need to be patient with yourself because these outer layers of the onion will peel off really easy, but the ones in the middle, it's going to be really hard to let go of. So your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, these are the relationships that you probably have the deepest attachment to, and it's going to be the hardest for you to let these go. So you're going to need to be patient with yourself and understand that it's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Now, the very last thing. This is like the end-all be-all of how to really, truly train your mind to eliminate attachment to the people that's close to you. This is a technique. This is a tool. Everything else I've been teaching with you is kind of like proactive ways that you can conduct your life in order to kind of function with non-attachment. But this is an actual technique that you can do, that the Buddha taught. He referred to it as contemplation of death. I use the words reflection on death, but it's the same thing. Contemplation of death or reflection on death. This is the way to actually eliminate your attachment to the people that are close to you. But you're probably not interested in doing this until you have a well-developed practice of the Eightfold Path. What this is where you actually sit and you close your eyes and you spend about 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes envisioning like this person has died, right? Because this is the most massive amount of impermanence that you could ever experience in a relationship. If your parents die, your life partner dies, or your children die, this in real life, if it really happened, if you were attached to them, you'd be really sorrowful and grieving about this, right? Well, this is going to happen. The people around you are going to die. And death is either going to sneak up on you and catch you by surprise, or you can confront death on your terms. It's up to you. You can say, hey, death, I see you over there in the corner. I know you're going to come visit me someday, and you're going to visit all my family and all my friends. Well, instead of you sneaking up on me, I'm going to come visit you, right? So that's what this is, where you sit and you envision in your mind as if these people have died. So you start with one person, say your mom. You kind of envision like she's died. And maybe your mom's already passed away, but you can relate this to somebody else in your life, right? So you can envision that someone has died. So now you've just gotten some news from the police or from doctors, or maybe a family member contacted you and they've informed you that this family member has died. And now you play this out in your mind as if it's really happened. You're not planning it. You're just kind of playing it out. You're kind of convincing the mind that this person has actually died, and you're living through that experience as if they have died. And if you're attached and you're actually doing this the way that it's taught, you might grieve. You might actually start crying. You might feel very sorrowful as you're doing this. And if this is what's happening, then you're triggering your craving. You're triggering it. And now your mind is experiencing that impermanence, that, oh my goodness, mom has died, or brothers and sisters have died, or children or life partner has died. And you play that out for 10, 15, 20 minutes in your mind. And like I said, you might grieve and be sorrowful at the end of this. And then that's where the Eightfold Path comes in, because if you've learned the Eightfold Path and breathing mindfulness meditation and all these other things, you'll be able to regain your stability of mind within a matter of a few hours or a few days. And you'll regain your stability, and you'll be like, all right, I understand mom hasn't actually truly died, but you lived through that as if she had died. And now you wait like a week or two or a month or two, and then you do it again. Now you do it again, and you grieve again probably, but a little bit less, right? And now you regain your stability and you do it again. And now over 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, eventually you get to the point where you confront mom's death and you're not sorrowful. You're not sad. You're not upset. You're not grieving. You're just come to terms with, yeah, mom's going to die. And you're going to be able to live through that, and life goes on. Because sometimes we think that if somebody dies, we can't live without them. I can't live without you if you die. This is the attachment. That's not the love. That's the attachment. I can't live without you if you die, right? So if you convince the mind that this person has died, and then you continue to live your life, you can see that, no, you can live without this person. It's okay. When I did this with my mom and my grandmother in my mind, I did this in my early 20s. After I came out of this, I had all these questions in my mind that if they had really died, I never asked them these questions, and I would have regretted never asking them these questions, because if they had really died, I wouldn't have been able to ask them these questions. And there were certain things that I felt like I needed to tell them that I never actually told them, that if they would have truly died, I would have regretted having never told them those things. So after I did this reflection on death, I called up my grandmother and I called up my mom and I said, hey, mom, I've always been meaning to tell you. Or, hey, grandma, I've always been meaning to ask you this particular thing, right? And that's the beauty about doing this, is that if they would have really truly died, I would have never been able to have those conversations. But because I did this within my own mind, I was able to just pick up the phone and call them. And since I did this in my early 20s, ever since that time, I felt like any time that I've spent with them is like bonus time. So I did this in my early 20s, and my mom died in 2017. So all that extra time that we had spent together, it felt like a bonus. And same thing with my grandmother. She's actually still alive. She's like 100 years old now. Right? So all this extra time is like bonus time. So now when I started spending time with them, it was like so enjoyable because I'd convinced my mind that they had died, but yet I still get to spend time with them. This was wonderful, right? So if you do this, not only is it going to help you eliminate your attachment, but you might come up with certain things that you feel like you've never said to them, or you would like to ask them certain questions. And if those things come to mind, regain your stability of your mind, and then a few days later or a few weeks later, just call them up or go visit them and say hello, and then ask them those questions or give them that information that you would have regretted never telling them if they would have truly died. So this is the benefit of this, is it trains the mind to let go. Because death is going to come visit you. And when people close to you die, if you're attached to them, if you've had that experience yet, it feels like someone's pulled the carpet out from under your feet, or it feels like someone's chopped you off at the knees, right? You guys might have those similar feelings. But if you do this, you can play this out in your mind. And then when my mom actually died in 2017, I didn't grieve at all. And it's not because I didn't love her, because I just wasn't attached to her. Because I understood this is impermanence, right? Of course she died because she was born, she had to die. So I was attached to her earlier in my life, but since I had let go of that attachment, then when she actually died, I wasn't upset. I didn't cry at all. But of course I love my mother, and my grandmother is going to die next, and I won't be upset when she dies either. My grandmother was very impactful in my life. I love her dearly. But when she dies, it's like, of course she died, right? Because she was born, she has to die. But I'm not holding on to her and wanting her to be permanent, because I already understood over 25 years ago that she's impermanent, and I trained my mind to understand that. So that's what you're doing, is you're essentially rewiring your mind, and you're training your mind to make sure you understand that grandma's impermanent, grandpa's impermanent, mom and dad is impermanent, your life partner is impermanent, your children are impermanent. All these relationships are impermanent. They're all going to leave you. Even if you die first, you're going to have to let go of these relationships. And it's going to be very painful for you if you don't do this work. By the time somebody dies, it'll be very painful because your mind's holding on. But if you do this work before they die, it won't be so painful, because then you'll get to enjoy all the rest of this time. It's like bonus time. And then when they actually die, you can just have appreciation and gratitude for the time that you spent with them. Instead of feeling miserable and horrible and feeling like you've lost something, instead, you can just have appreciation for the time that you actually spent together. Because when my mom died, I didn't feel like I lost anything. I thought about it like, wow, at least I had all this time with her. Or like when my grandmother dies, I'll just have appreciation. I won't feel like I've lost anything. I gained something. I gained this wonderful woman who's had an enormous impact in my life. That was a huge gain for me. That's not a loss when she dies, right? But oftentimes our mind is thinking of it that way. So one of the things that you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're changing your perspective and how you look at things. Instead of looking at this death as a loss, look at it as a gain. Like, wow, this is a real gain that I had this woman or I had this man in my life. This was wonderful that I had this person in my life, right? So you can change your perspective of how you look at things. So this reflection on death or contemplation on death is what's going to help train your mind to let go. So you would like to be able to do this at some point where you feel that you're ready. Now, if you have a big business meeting coming up tomorrow, this isn't the time to do this, right? You would like to do it at a time where you can go through a little bit of grieving if you need to, right? And that's why you would like to have that breathing mindfulness meditation and these other things on board, so that you have some other tools to regain your stability of mind, because you might grieve for a period of time when you do these things. Okay, so this is everything that I have to teach you guys. I'll just open up to any questions that you have. If you have questions on this, or if you have questions on other things, just let me know. I see Claire coming for a mic, so she must have a question. So we'll let Claire go first. But if the rest of you guys have questions, or if anyone online has questions, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask questions if you like.
I was with you all the way until that very last part about grieving. What I thought I had understood from you from the other teachings I've heard you talk about was that basically we don't want to have feelings. That if we're attached to something, we see the thought coming, we cut it off and we let it go. And now I'm hearing you talk about acknowledging and allowing grieving to come. So can you talk to me the difference between feelings or thoughts and cutting them off and letting them go, and then allowing grieving?
Sure. So when you're having contact through the sense bases, like the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind, it's going to trigger a craving if there's a craving in the mind. And now when you have those bodily sensations, you would like to cut it off and let it go, training the mind, restraining the mind, not allowing the mind to have that conditioned feeling and stay wired that way, right? You're trying to cut that off. Well, when you're letting go of a craving, it's very painful, right? Like if you were ever a smoker or a drinker, or if you ever had relationships before, as you guys were going away from each other and you're letting go of this craving, it's very painful. The way that I think about this is you have to walk through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side, right? So if your mind has an attachment to someone and you're holding on, when they're alive, you feel happy and you feel great. But when they die, you're going to have this grief and this sadness that because the mind's not getting what it wants, it's not getting its craving fulfilled. So in these really deeply rooted attachments like this, you're going to have to walk through the fire in order to get to the fresh air. You're going to have to walk through those painful feelings. It's almost like joining the mafia. If you join the mafia, hey, it's really great. Maybe at first it's really fun. You got all these new friends. There's lots of people to help you with things. But if you want to get out, you have to walk through the gauntlet, right? You got to walk through all this pain to get out of the mafia. So your mind has taken on all these cravings. So while we talk about enlightenment and we talk about this peace and this joy and all this wonderful stuff, this concentration, yeah, that's true. But there's a lot of work to do to get to that. Like it can be really painful to let go of these cravings, desires, attachments. So these cravings, these attachments, these people that you're attached to, you're not going to get out of the attachment without feeling the pain. You're going to experience it because it's just too deeply rooted. You can't cut it off and let it go. But if you went into a store and you really wanted a chocolate bar and the chocolate bar is not there and you feel the sensations coming up, you can cut that off. It's like, don't be annoyed. It's just a chocolate bar. Let it go. But with these kinds of things, it's not possible for that. You're going to have to let go, and it's going to be painful. So if you were able to cut off the grief, you can, right? But you're going to experience it. And that's why it might take a couple of hours or a couple of days. I've even had some students tell me it took them a week or so, like 5 days to a week, to let go and get back to the peacefulness after they've done this. So that's the difference, is that this is a deeply rooted attachment that you're going to feel these painful feelings. There's no other option. And that's what you're doing, is you're triggering it. Right. And some people in modern psychology, they call this exposure therapy, where you're exposing the mind to what it doesn't want. And this is how you train it to let go and to get comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great questions. Other questions?
I want to ask about what is the, I guess I'm hearing eliminating attachment will help you be content a lot of times, or help you eliminate the discontentedness. But it also, in my mind, feels a little selfish to me that I'm eliminating my attachment to all the people that I'm close to just to make myself content all the time. And so I want to ask about the purpose of this and how you think about it.
Okay, so it's important that you know what attachment is. Attachment is holding on, craving permanence, wanting this person to be a certain way. That's the selfishness. I want mom to be this way. I want brother and sister to be this way. I can only be happy if they do it this way. That's the selfishness. By letting go of the attachment, what you're saying is, I'm not going to attach my feelings to you. I'm not going to form my feelings based on what this person chooses to do. So if this person decides they would like to go off and join the circus, okay, if that's what you would like to do, have fun, enjoy. If this person decides they would like to be a doctor or lawyer, okay, enjoy, have fun. If this person decides they would like to, I don't know, anything, right? Be a street sweeper and sweep the streets and clean up the trash. Okay, if that's what you enjoy, wonderful. I'm pleased for you. You do whatever you would like to do. That's non-attachment, right? So attachment is, I can only be happy if you do things my way. That's the selfish part. So it's important that you understand what attachment is, so you can see that it's actually the attachment that is the selfishness. Letting go of the attachment is to get free of forming your feelings based on this other person, and then being fully comfortable with whatever decisions they make, because you know that they are their own being and they need to make their own decisions.
And a follow-up to that is, if we've eliminated all the attachment to our relationship, why do there need to be even relationship? Like, what is the necessity of maintaining those relationships?
Yeah, this is a common question, because the only way that we see that in the unenlightened state, that why we want to have a relationship is like we're physically attracted to this person, we like them financially or intellectually, maybe we want to have sex with this person and we want something from this person, and that's why we have a relationship. Or we're completely on the other side and it's like, you can't do anything for me, so I don't want to be in a relationship with you. So there's this middle way where it's enjoyable to have friends. It's enjoyable to spend time with people, not because you want anything from them, but just because it's fun to spend time with people and have conversations and socialize and interact. And it's just because you enjoy spending time with people, and that's it. But you can also be alone and feel completely comfortable with that too. So there's no expectation or wanting from this person. But that's what we tend to do in the unenlightened state, is we form relationships based on things that we want. That's the attachment, that's the craving, and that's the selfishness. But what you would ultimately like to do is get to the point where you're just completely fine having relationships with anybody that you would like to have a relationship with. And of course, with your life partner, if you're having a life partner, you guys might be involved in a sexual relationship, and that's the only person you're having that with, because it's wise to have sex with just one person. That's why we get sexually transmitted diseases and people get beat up and murdered when they go around and having sex with lots of people. They have all kinds of problems in their life because of that, because it's an unwise decision to do that. So in terms of like sexual relationships, you're just going to have a relationship with one person. But in terms of all your other relationships, you can just be comfortable with all these different relationships. But sometimes what we do in relationships, I don't know what it's like for you, but when I was growing up, you would kind of call your friends all the time, and we would like check, like, how are you doing? What are you up to? And if I called you this week, that means you had to call me next week. And if you didn't call me, that means you weren't a good friend, right? This is an expectation. But if you can practice non-attachment, let me say, if you have attachment like this, where you expect people to do certain things in your life, you can only have about 5 friends, maybe 10 at the most, because everybody's expecting each other to call each other and check in on each other. But if you practice non-attachment, you can be friends with thousands of people, because you can spend time with somebody and enjoy your time with each other. But then when you're away from each other, you can be completely content with that too. So I'll give you an example. Like when I was in the US, I was playing the mandolin, and we used to play bluegrass music with each other, and we were all learning how to play bluegrass music, and we have these little jams, and there was these people that I was hanging out with, and we would have a good old time, right? But none of us were attached to each other. We were just having fun playing music. Well, I left and went to Thailand, and they knew it, and I moved here in 2015. Well, I think it was, what was it? Maybe the year 2003, I think it was. This guy like contacted me out of the blue. He's like, hey, David, we used to play mandolin together. I'm coming to Thailand for a business trip. I'm going to be in Bangkok. I was thinking to come up and fly up and see you in Chiang Mai and hang out for a little bit. Are you up for that? And I was like, Yeah, sure. Why not? His name was John, actually. Sure, John, why not? Come on up. I hadn't heard from this guy since I was in America. Him and I weren't talking with each other. We weren't checking in on each other. But when we were hanging out together, we were hanging out, having a great time. And then we just didn't have a reason to talk to each other, so we didn't talk to each other. But then when he came to Thailand, I was like, hey, what's going on? Let's pick it up where we left off. And then now that he's gone, we don't have to be in touch with each other anymore. So if you can practice non-attachment, you can have lots of friends all over the world. And when you're together, you're together. And when you're apart, you're apart. No big deal. So you would like to be able to have relationships where you're not attached and you just enjoy spending time with each other, and you understand that that's not permanent. It's impermanent. Sometimes you'll be together and sometimes you'll be away, and that's okay. But then you're going to have other people who are close to you that you spend time with regularly, right? Like your life partner or your parents and people like this. But with friends and stuff like this, the only purpose is just to be friendly with anybody around you and go out and socialize and spend time and enjoy yourself with each other. But you don't expect anything or want anything from each other. You have to be able to see how to do this more and more. Because one thing we were talking about the other day is in a life partner relationship, there's usually sexual contact. And in that situation, there's an attachment. If you're having sex with somebody, there's an attachment. You can't be having sex with someone without an attachment. There's going to be an attachment because the mind is attached to the pleasant feelings and clinging to the pleasant feelings that comes through sexual contact. So more and more, an individual has to be able to see how to have relationships where there isn't anything you want from the relationship. And that just takes time to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Oh, Chris.
So with respect to that previous comment about grieving, how can one differentiate when it's wiser to engage with a feeling and what needs to be felt versus letting go?
In all situations in your daily life, whenever there's any discontentness arising, you like to cut it off and let it go. That's what you'd like to do. That's what the Buddha teaches, so that the mind doesn't stay wired like this to have conditioned feelings. But in this particular activity of reflecting on your death and contemplation of death, you can try to cut off the grief that's starting to arise, but you probably aren't going to be able to. It's not like a chocolate bar. It's not a small attachment. So this is the only situation that's like that, is when you're doing this reflection on death, you're going to experience the feelings. But let's just say it's not this activity. Let's just say you haven't done this yet and you're still attached to mom, and you get that phone call that she's in the back of an ambulance being rushed to the hospital because she's been in a terrible car accident. If you notice the discontentedness arising, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. But in this situation, you're going to have a hard time to cut it off and let it go. It's afterwards that you're going to cut it off. And eventually the mind's going to regain its composure, and there's going to be less attachment in the mind, so that the next time you do it, it won't be as significant. Yes, ma'am.
So now I'm thinking, like, what about if I want to try this, like, I would say, like, tomorrow? Like, should I have someone, like a teacher or something, that is with me to help me to deal with all these emotions? Or can I do it just by my own and then to see what's happening? Like,
you can do it on your own. You don't need to have a teacher to do any of this stuff. You need to have a teacher to learn how to do these things. But when you're actually doing these things, you should do them on your own. But what I was sharing is that in the Eightfold Path, which, since I'm in here, I can go all the way back because I know a lot of you guys haven't studied this with me yet. Let me just show it to you. This is the Eightfold Path. This is 8 individual steps that I taught on Monday. That's going to train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And you haven't learned this yet. So your mind hasn't learned how to let go yet. You haven't done the breathing mindfulness meditation. You haven't done all these other things. So it doesn't mean you can't do the contemplation of death, the reflection of death. You surely can, but you're probably going to find it a lot more challenging to regain your composure afterwards because you don't have all this training under your belt. One of the things that you learn as part of right concentration is the breathing mindfulness meditation. And you've trained your mind maybe for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, or even a year before somebody gets to this point where they're doing contemplation of death. So your mind is better prepared to do the contemplation of death. So it's not as impactful to you because your mind has already let go a little bit. But even if you are experiencing the grief and sorrow, you have another tool like breathing mindfulness meditation to regain your composure, where right now you might not have that. So it'll probably take you a little bit longer to regain your composure. So you might grieve for 5 days or even a week or even longer maybe, because even some students that have been studying with me for 6 months or a year and they're doing the breathing mindfulness meditation, they tell me that sometimes when they do the contemplation or reflection of death, it takes them a good 5 days sometimes to regain their stability of their mind. It's not like they're bouncing off the walls or anything. It's just that they're sorrowful and grieving throughout the 5 days, and they feel quite sad about about their mom's death, for example. So you could still do it if you like, but you don't have all the tools and techniques to more quickly regain your composure. So like when I did this with my mom and my grandmother, within a matter of like an hour or two, my mind was back to being completely fine. And that's why I was able to pick up the phone and call my mom and my grandmother and say, hey, Grandma, I've always been meaning to tell you something, or I've always been meaning to ask you something. It just took me like an hour or two to get my mind right back where it needed to be. But if you don't have your mind well trained, it's going to just take you longer. That's all. But you can still do it on your own.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
One more question.
Mm-hmm.
So, in sort of detaching from the people you're in relationship with, where's the balance between detaching from your expectations and drawing a limit to where their bad behavior toward you is allowable?
This is where you make wise decisions. Everything that the Buddha teaches you is all based on discernment. Discernment is wise decision making. So let's just say you met somebody at a yoga class, and right away you guys go to lunch together, and they're like impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, like right away out of the gate. You have discernment, and you would be like, you know what? Probably not going to contact this person anymore. Right? You're probably just going to move on. Not that you hate them, not that you're looking down on them, not that you're judging them. You're just realizing, hey, this isn't probably the best relationship for me, right? But now let's just say you met someone in yoga class. You guys have been hanging out for 6 months or a year. Everything's been wonderful, but they ended up being disrespectful once. Okay, you see the disrespect. You know that it's unwise, but you know what? You got history with this person. No big deal. It's only an enlightened being who's going to be perfect all the time. So you just understand, like, okay, we can deal with this. You know, I'm not going to expect this person to be a certain way. But now if they started getting into a pattern of continuously being disrespectful and impolite, and you'd probably just gradually move away. So you don't need to put your expectations on them and expect them to be a certain way. You can just choose to move on yourself without even necessarily saying anything to them. So so the expectations, all that's going to do is cause you discontentedness. But even though you don't have expectations, you have wisdom to know that every relationship needs politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. And that's what a good, healthy relationship is built upon. And in a situation where it's a brand new person and they come right out of the gate being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, you know that there's no way to build a relationship on that. But if there's another situation where they've been polite and respectful for a long-term period, now you know with your discernment, hey, I can still work with this. It's just a matter of this person's having a bad day, and now I understand. I'm just going to go away, let them think about what they did, and maybe they'll contact you and apologize. But don't expect that. Don't want that. But just know that this person's having a challenging time, and maybe you even call them up a week later and say, hey, Rebecca, is everything okay? It seemed like you were having a little bit of trouble the other day. Just checking in. How are things going for you? Right? And that's what it means to be a good friend, is being understanding that this person isn't going to be perfect. So if you have expectations, it's just going to cause you to be discontent because the mind's expecting them to be polite and respectful, and now they're not. Whereas if you don't expect them to be polite and respectful, you can maintain your contentedness even when they're disrespectful. And now you just make wise decisions of, does it make sense for me to be in this relationship or not? But you don't base it on, they were disrespectful one time after 1 year of friendship and I'm out of here, right? That would be unwise. So you would like to look at each situation in a unique way and just use your discernment, your wise decision making of whether or not it'd be wise to be in this relationship, understanding that politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect is a baseline minimum for all relationships. And you'd like to see a certain amount of that. And then you'll know that this is going to be a viable relationship. And then when you don't see that, you can easily step away without having to tell the person that they're wrong, so to speak, or they're doing things that are unwise. And then with you not having expectations, you can just maintain your calmness and composure, whether you're with this person or you're not with this person. You can be completely content either way. Mm-hmm. Pretty straightforward when you learn it, right? No? Okay. It takes a little bit of time. To me, it's just very straightforward now. It's very straightforward. You have some more?
It's conceivably straightforward, like for new relationships, but if you've been in a relationship for a very long time,
yeah,
you know, like I was in a very long-term marriage, and at some point it was just like, wow, I'm getting pummeled here. At some point it's too much, and it's really hard to know when that is. Yeah,
there's no magic formula. That's where you've got to decide for yourself. And, you know, there were probably a lot of things going wrong in that relationship for a long period of time, and it just never got attended to, right? It just never got addressed. And then it went on and on and on and on and on and on, and it just built up to be too much because you didn't have the skills at that time, you didn't have the wisdom, and neither did they, right? So you ultimately got to a point where you decided, we need to move on, right? But if it was a different situation where you had a different amount of wisdom, you can see the problem early on, you can spot it, and you guys can deal with it right away. And you can keep this relationship nice and clean. That's what you'd like to be able to do. But we don't have those skills, preloaded in our mind when we're born. So now that you're gaining that, you probably approach your relationships very differently now than you used to in the past. So you would like to just be attentive to your relationships, mainly attentive to your own mind, responsible for your own mind. But then where you see people are, overly disrespectful and unkind and impolite, you can just choose to not associate with that and move on while still loving them. Have love and care for them and a genuine interest for them being well. And some of the times the most loving and kind thing you can do is actually move away from somebody. Because if they're getting attached to you and they're really getting angry and bitter and harsh and hostile, sometimes the best thing you can do is move on. It'll help them to eliminate their attachment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have a question?
How should we deal with the tendency to please people that are really close to you? Because to give an example, especially in the case of my parents, I growing up always trying to meet their expectations and satisfy what they want. Mm-hmm. And so from small things like my mom expects us to sit together and eat, or it's like, for this trip, I really want to go on a solo trip, but I know taking my mom on a trip will make her really happy. So I do that. So what is the cause for this, and how should we deal with that?
Yeah, the reason why the mind is trying to please your parents is because you're attached to them. You're having a craving, desire, attachment to please them. And you need to be able to see that you can't please your parents because it's their expectations. They're having certain expectations. And if you meet their expectations, it's kind of like feeding a monster. Because the more that you meet their expectations, if you work really hard to meet their expectations, as soon as you feed that, they're going to feel happy for like a week or two or however long, and then their expectations are going to change. And now they want more. And now you have to work really hard to feed that. It's like this monster gets bigger and bigger because they're forming their feelings based on you. And now they get pleasant feelings when you do things their way. So it's almost like a drug addiction where you keep needing more and more and more and more and more of it. So you need to just tell yourself, and maybe even tell your family, I'm not going to meet your expectations. I had this conversation with my parents at age 17. My family used to invite me over for holidays, and they had all these expectations of me, and I just looked them all in the eyes and I said, I'm never going to meet your expectations. What? Yeah, that's not my goal. My goal isn't to meet your expectations. And you got to be able to see when these people are putting their expectations on you or attempting to, and you got to identify it as their expectation and don't adopt it in your own mind. Because if you inherit their expectation, you're just inheriting a craving, desire, attachment. It's your mind choosing to do it. But if you're trying to get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments, your wants and expectations, the last thing you're interested in doing is inheriting somebody else's and adopting somebody else's. So as soon as somebody starts putting their expectation on you, you got to recognize it for what it is and be like, nope, not interested in that. And if you need to talk to them and tell them and say, hey, Mom, I know you have this expectation of me to do that. I would like you to know that I'm never going to do that. Are you serious? You're my daughter. You're supposed to do what I want you to do. No, that's not the way the world works. Sorry, Mom. Right? You just have to sometimes be open and honest and kind of humorous about it. Right? Because parents are really famous, and I know in your culture, really famous, and in Indian culture too, parents will put their expectations on you and try to control you. And they think that's the way that they're supposed to do it. They think that's the love, because that craving, desire, attachment is masquerading as love. And they think they're loving you by putting their expectations on you. But that's not actually the love. But their mind doesn't see that because they're lacking wisdom. But if you have the wisdom to know that that's not the love, so now you can just be honest with them and tell them that you're not going to meet their expectations. And then when you do something nice for them, you can do it. But don't do it because they expect you to do it or they want you to do it. Do it because you're interested in doing it and you're practicing generosity, that you're interested in sharing with them without any expectation. Because the more that you have expectations of them, the more they're going to put their expectations on you. And that's where if you get free of your expectations and putting expectations on others, more and more people will get used to that. Because if you notice, you guys don't put expectations on me. You guys don't put any expectations on me, right? And it's wonderful. It's beautiful. We all have a great time together. We all spend time with each other. We never get angry or upset. I've never been angry at a student. And, students sometimes, they're not deeply studying students, but they've come here once in a while. They sometimes there's been people who come here like maybe for a couple of hours and they get angry, but they're not really studying. They're having expectations, right? But if you don't have expectations of your teacher, then you don't get angry, you don't get upset. Like the other day I taught until 1 p.m. when we were supposed to go to lunch at 12, but nobody was upset. Nobody was angry or irritated. So when you start learning to live in a relationship where there's no expectations and you feel what that feels like, and that feels very enjoyable and freeing, then you learn how to do that in your relationships. And now the more that you're doing that in your relationships, the more that those people will tend to do that with you. One of the first relationships that people sometimes have where you learn how to love unconditionally is from your Buddhist teacher. Because I love all of you guys. I love every single one of you. I would like to see you be well. I have a genuine interest in seeing you be well, but I don't want anything from you. I don't expect anything of you. And you should be able to feel that in the way that I spend time with you guys, that I don't want anything from you at all. I'm just here to give to you. And when you learn what that feels like and you see how that feels, then you can replicate that in other parts of your life. But it's going to take you time to learn how to do that because your mind is so conditioned to have expectations of other people. And when they don't meet your expectations, you get angry, and then you might go away from them and you push them away. So you just have to transform all of this in your mind so your mind's not doing that anymore. And it takes time to figure out how to do that. So all this training will come together and culminate more and more. So talking about teaching over time, it's about 3:25, almost 3:30. I usually finish up at 3 o'clock each day. So I think I'll just finish up here, but I don't see anyone getting mad or angry. So that's good. No expectations. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is just end by, like I usually do, which is thanking you guys for learning. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest in learning these teachings, because the more that you learn them, this is the wonderful thing for you, that you're becoming a more peaceful person. It's so wonderful wonderful for you to learn and practice the teachings. It's also wonderful for the people around you, because as you're becoming more and more peaceful, you're putting out less and less harm to the people around you. And in this way, you're helping all of humanity, because you're putting out less and less harm in the world. So this is the very best thing you could do for yourself, for those close to you, and all of humanity, is train your own mind. This is the best thing you could ever do. So thank you for your effort and your energy to train your own mind. This is wonderful. As you guys need help, just feel free to come ask me. I'm here to help you. And thank you so much for your time today. And perhaps we'll see you tomorrow. What I'm going to be doing tomorrow, just so you guys know, for those of you guys that might be considering coming, I'll show you guys what I'm going to be teaching tomorrow. I'm going to be teaching this, sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. If you have children, it's going to help you to learn how to do that. But even if you don't have children, this will help you. Like if you would like to teach mom a little bit of the teachings, or you'd like to teach dad a little bit of the teachings, or brothers and sisters, I'm going to show you skillful ways to teach those people the teachings. Then after I teach you that, and of course we're going to start off with meditation in the morning, and then after that in the afternoon, I'm going to teach you developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends and a life partner. I'm going to teach you how to make decisions about who to include in your life, because this is very important for you. So perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Okay, take care. Sawadee ka. You're welcome.